Yeah, sound is on. Happy days, guys. Welcome along to another edition of 420 News. It is Friday, guys. It is high day, so hope you're all well out there. And that, I'm in a bit of a better mood than I was there on Wednesday. The mood was quite low, so I hope that didn't come across in the show. I see some comments coming in as well, guys. Thanks very much for the congratulations on reaching the 1K there as well, Gary. If you haven't seen the post, I reached 1,000 subscribers on YouTube over the weekend. I was quite happy, or during the week actually, I was quite happy with that. I have a bit of news to get through for you there, guys. Just aware that my audio seems that it's a bit louder or anything, but let me know if you've any issues out there with my audio. But it seems like it's coming up here a bit loud, but it should be grand. So guys, we've a bit of news to get through there for you today, and the first bit of news that I have for you is that a judge has declared that 3 houses that were linked to the cannabis production are the proceeds of crime. Now, I don't have a little scene here ready for that, but I just wanted to follow up on this and to open that with the news, because this was on the 420 News before. It was CAB were challenging that there was Chinese nationals that owned some houses, and they were trying to say that those houses were bought with the proceeds of crime. They were successful in proving that in the court of law. Happy days, everyone saying the audio is good. Sound nice one for that, guys. But they were able to prove it in the court of law that the people weren't in possession of proper income, basically, to be able to buy the houses that they bought. There was 3 houses that were purchased. I don't know, was there about $500,000 worth of houses there within the properties? This was in the High Court, and the judge declared that the houses represent the proceeds of crime due to being linked to cannabis production. So, there was people after moving into Ireland, Chinese nationals, they were able to grow enough cannabis to be able to buy 3 houses. I suppose, guys, all you out there understand how much money is actually in cannabis once you're good enough at growing it and able to distribute it. And these non-nationals were over here taking advantage of the Irish state, because over in China, I'd imagine they would have got much more harshly punished than what they would have here for their crimes, and maybe they might have made a bit more money here as well. But there was 3 properties anyway. One of them was number 1 Mountain View, Bashna Road, Tipperary Town, bought in 2015 for €130,500. Then also another house was where is it? On Raheely Road in Fermoy, County Cork, worth 135,000, bought in 2017. The judge then has now ordered that those houses be taken into the possession of the state, and I'd imagine the state are going to sell them. I wonder how much will they actually get for them. But you wonder really, that there's so much money here that the state are actually making, that these houses are being repossessed and they're going to be sold on, and the money goes into it. And that's something we're going to touch off actually later on in the show, is about what happens with that money. I mentioned that the money all goes into the central fund and gets redistributed then from there for things like the roads, policing, hospitals, whatever, you name it, it gets used for all of that. But there has been some TDs now arguing in the Dáil, and I have those clips there for you later on, that the funds that have been seized by the authorities in those areas should be diverted back in, or ring-fenced back for those areas. I don't really disagree with them there in that sense. I suppose it kind of makes sense, if you make a massive seizure of cash or whatever in a particular area, and that area is kind of affected maybe by the drug dealing or addiction and stuff, that the money might go back into that area in certain ways, maybe by setting up, different community facilities, like a little gym where kids can train, do gymnastics, do dancing, do whatever it is, you name it. But when I say a gym, a publicly owned gym where the people can come in, rent the space and provide these services for the community at a low cost. As currently, I know myself, I train in a martial arts gym, and the cost for membership is quite high, because we've to rent out a premises, and we've to compete with other businesses out there that are renting these premises, and that puts the rent up, and we're basically providing a community service. While it is run like a business and everything, it's an incredibly important service in the community, giving young people an outlet for just developing their own skills, channeling their energy. For me, it was Thai boxing, or for me, it was boxing actually, that I found my way into. And that was subsidised at the time by the state, but unfortunately some of these other sports aren't. And it would be great to maybe see some of this money going back into some of those community projects. So I definitely don't disagree with them there. And so in other news, guys, and you might have seen this one in the news earlier in the week, and thank God I don't have a photo to go with this. And nice one there, Sean, for sharing the stream, and to anybody else who has shared it so far. And don't forget to like and subscribe as well, guys, if you haven't. But this was coming out of above in Dublin, and the Gardai were carrying out a raid on a drug dealer's house. And a man in his 40s was arrested in the incident, but basically when the Gardai entered the house, and I'd imagine they didn't enter it quietly, like they probably entered it very loud and very threatening, you know, and the dog kicks into defense mode. Now, they have said in the statement here that it was a bull mastiff type dog, but saying that, like, that doesn't mean that the dog is going to have to be aggressive, but certainly I can see why they would argue that you wouldn't want it. But it's just very interesting because, and rest in peace to the dog. It's unfortunate here that the dog was killed, and for such a paltry amount of drugs as well, €5,000 worth of cannabis found in the seizure. So that's about 250 grams of cannabis in total, a quarter of a kilo, and a dog has lost his life, another victim of a war on drugs. Because sadly, if drug prohibition wasn't as it was, you wouldn't have people growing cannabis and maybe having these kind of intimidating dogs in their property in order to protect themselves. Because as Trev Coleman unfortunately found out, when you rely on the authorities to come and protect you in your time of need and you're a cannabis grower, they're going to pick on you for your cannabis growing, and they're not going to try to protect you, because Trev Coleman had 4 people breaking into his house. And he lived in in an area of England anyway where they thought they had a kind of a de facto decriminalisation, that the cops weren't going to go after people who were just growing for their own personal uses. But unfortunately they did. They took all these cannabis plants, they turned his house upside down, and he only rang him because he had 4 people trying to break into his house. Like, this man had a dog here to protect his, so I don't know, what he had was a €5,000 worth of cannabis. He didn't want a rival drug member, a gang member, to kind of break into his house, so he got an intimidating dog. I don't know, but again, if you take prohibition out of the equation, then it's much less likely that you're going to have situations where people are growing cannabis are possessing cannabis in their house and having a large dog there then as well to protect them, because they don't feel like the authorities can protect them at all. Again, that's prohibition's fault. It's absolutely ridiculous, and it's a sad state of affairs. Imagine if this was a different story. Let's reverse the role. Let's say the Gardai broke into the house in the raid to take the cannabis off the guy who had the cannabis, and the dog actually grabbed hold of one of them. Imagine if the headline actually here read, instead of Gardai shoot dog and kill dog in drug raid, Garda member killed in drug raid by large dog. Imagine that was the headline. Garda member died and because he was going in to get 250 grams of cannabis. Imagine that. Any of those Garda, imagine having to go back and tend while, and then one of their family members, you know, your husband, your dad, your mother, your wife, whatever kind of gender the person might be who got killed because of 250 grams of cannabis. Well done, like the prohibitionists who put our Gardai in the line of fire like this. It's very unfortunate. But again, it was, I suppose, good in a sense that it didn't go that way, and the guard was able to protect themselves. But where's it going to escalate to? When's it going to stop? Because what if the Gardai want to carry out these no-knock raids like they do in America, where they don't knock, they come up, and they do that here. They do no-knock raids, but they don't do it similar to America in that they don't use explosive grenades. Because that's what happened in this case here, and I'm just going to hide these photos there, but it was an explosive grenade used during a no-knock raid, critically injures a toddler while asleep in crib. And this was a no-knock raid that was carried out in America, where the SWAT team were acting off of what was later found out to be false information, actually given by a snitch over in America. But the snitch said that basically the toddler's uncle was drug dealing out of the house, but that was false. The toddler's uncle actually wasn't ever even in the house, and when the SWAT made the raid, they threw a flash grenade, an explosive type grenade in the window, and unfortunately it landed in the crib. and it done serious damage to the young child. And look, sorry for popping that up. Look, I should say viewer discretion, because it is rather graphic. What happened to the child. So if you're all squeamish, look, and I apologise for flashing it up, but just look away for a sec. But you see it here, that the young child, he was only 3 at the time, and you see damage done in the top right to his face. The mother said that she heard the baby crying, and she thought it was just because of the loud noise being made during the raid. But when she went to the baby's room, she noticed all of the smoke and the charred crib. Because the crib was basically like all burnt and everything, and the baby had a gaping hole in his chest where his rib cage was exposed, and also you can see the damage then done to the face. That child, that was a couple of years ago, that raid was, but I was a member of Students for Sensible Drug Policy at the time, and I can remember highlighting it, but I was horrified by it, and there was a big campaign there, Justice for Boo Boo, because that was the baby's nickname. And here he is now, all grown up, but you see the marks left, like a lifetime of scarring there. Another, again, on a victim of the war on drugs, where you know, we just should be taking a more compassionate approach, supplying the drugs to the drug users, because effectively the prohibition has failed. The prohibition has failed, and we're going to see many bits of evidence here later on in the show as to how prohibition has failed. It's a massive failure. And the next headline is reflecting on that, you know. And it is good to see him recovered, and I'm glad I was able to find that picture there and finish on a bit more positive note. And they were well received as well. The campaign did get very well received over there in the US. There was a lot of supporters out there calling for the end of those type of raids by the authorities, because they're just a recipe for disaster, really. But the next headline is drug dealers in Limerick are operating a non-stop drug supermarket, and that's in a housing estate in Limerick. And this was brought up there in the Dáil as well recently, and I've clips of that there as we're going to get into in a little bit. But in this article it says locals are demanding action on what they say is a 24/7 drug supermarket in a Limerick city centre housing estate. Politicians and people working and living in St Mary's Park, known as Island Field, told the Irish Examiner that the drugs trade has never been worse. So while the senior Gardai promise a relentless pursuit of criminal gangs, local politicians say a lack of enforcement and resources have allowed the drugs trade to get out of hand in the area. One local resident says it's a little bit like Aldi. There's always traffic up and down the road. There are cars and taxis in and out and up and down of the houses, and it's getting well out of hand, and it's very sad. The local Sinn Féin TD Maurice Qinlivan, he raised the issue in the Dáil, and I have some clips of that there, and he says that the level of dealing is unbelievable. It's 24/7. This is a good old working class community, and the vast bulk are decent people working all their lives and putting up with this 24/7. People coming into the area, buying drugs, a backlog of cars, particularly on Monday mornings. The dealing has never been anything like it is now. He said, I genuinely think local Gardai are doing their best, but its resources and the courts are backed up. And there you go, guys. As I say, civil disobedience protest for the cannabis community, because we don't need to be feeding into this backlog and the waste of resources, because our Gardai, they do incredible work, in fairness to them, you know, finding lost people, like some of those horrific scenes that they come upon, I'm not going to mention some of the horrific acts that were done there in Cork over the years, but you're probably aware of them. But and outside of that, they have to deal with people like me for cannabis. Come on, like, I don't want to be wasting their time. But another local Sinn Féin councillor, John Costello, who has lived in the estate, and said some residents are living in fear of what has become a blatant blight on the area. And he echoes the opinion that it's a 24/7 supermarket. You go down on 9:10 on a Monday morning and cars are piling up. He said the area's promised regeneration has gotten worse. The physical landscape is scarred. The demolitions are far too slow, and they are hiding drugs in these derelict sites and are dealing out of there. He said local people are scared to raise their voices and are afraid to ring Gardai. There you go, guys. This is all evidence that the war on drugs has failed. You've people in their communities that are terrified to even engage with the authorities to tell them what's going on because they know the authorities are under-resourced and they're not going to answer their calls. It's absolutely ridiculous. The Gardai probably know the houses that are being dealt out of. They probably know what time is most active there for them. But they do little or anything about it at all, as I see, these drug dealers operating with impunity within the area, and there's little being done about it. I'm going to pop on over there and just play some clips for you guys, just so you can see some of the comments that were made above in the Dáil. So yeah, fingers crossed there that this works for you. So you see my little notes here. So let me just go to Maurice's comments here in the Dáil. Boom.
Deputy Maurice Qinlivan.
Thanks very much, Minister. Unfortunately, the issue of drugs in my home city of Limerick has worsened during the pandemic and what seems like a daily basis. The issue is not new, and previous ministers have failed utterly in dealing with the issue. I sometimes wonder if they bothered at all. There's a specific problem in the St Mary's Park area of my city, and I want to raise that specifically with you. I mentioned this to say to you before, Minister, and to the Minister for Justice. I also raised it with An Taoiseach and the Taoiseach. It needs urgent intervention from government with additional resources from An Garda Síochána, criminal assets bureaus, court services, Limerick Council and other agencies who all need to intervene as a matter of urgency. This is an older, very settled housing estate with lots of wonderful working families who have lived there for generations. It is some of the finest people you will ever encounter. Many of them are my friends. They've worked all their lives when they could. Now it feels like drugs and drugs gangs have taken over, and worse still, they seem to operate with impunity. These drug dealers are ignoring planning regulations on a regular basis, building unauthorised structures that need to be removed but remain in situ, public land grabbed and retained which needs to be reclaimed, walls built in total disregard to planning regulations. As we speak, here and now, for which there is no planning, a structure is being constructed. A number of council officials have told me privately that they are afraid to enforce many of the regulations. Derelict houses which are due for demolition are used to store drugs. Despite Gardai requests, these structures remain in situ as the warehouses of the wicked. The Defence Forces were deployed last year in Limerick to assist the Criminal Assets Bureau. They should be called on again if necessary to deal with the ongoing problems. The local drugs gangs regularly give two fingers to everybody. The two fingers from these drug gangs are not just to me, the local community and Garda Síochána or Limerick Council. There are two fingers to the entire state. In drugs seized across the city, crack cocaine was amongst the drugs seized. Crack cocaine, as you know, Minister, is a devastating drug. It has destroyed communities across the world. It is extremely addictive and regarded as the most addictive form of cocaine. As I've said before in the Dáil, and I'll say it again, there really is a special place in hell for anybody who sells, distributes or benefits from the profit of sale of crack cocaine. Unfortunately, drug dealing operates like a 24-hour drive-through. Taxis often form queues while people from all over the region purchase their drugs. Many people simply walk into the estate. It's like a non-stop drugs supermarket. The vast bulk of people getting their drugs don't live in the area. It has been said to me that the most vulnerable can be brought to court for often minor offences, but drug dealers, many facing serious charges, can swan around the city selling their filth while ruining lives and communities. In the mid-2000s, the drug problem in Limerick was ignored. It cost us massively. It cost the state resources and cost people their lives. The failure to act then ultimately led to the need for massive government intervention, which ultimately led to the Limerick Regeneration Programme. I implore you to act now. You have no time to lose. We do not want to return to those very, very dark days. The residents need assurance that they are not being abandoned. I'm in contact on an almost basis by them. They feel utterly, utterly abandoned. So my question to you, Minister, is we need a specific task force in the area that could be modelled on what has been achieved in areas of Dublin. So will you commit to doing that and talking to your colleagues? Or Margaret?
Dennis Naughton.
So there you have the question put, or it wasn't really a question, it was more a statement read to him because Frank Feighan actually never got to respond to that at all, but he certainly did get questioned, excuse me there, he certainly did get questioned numerous times throughout his day in the Dáil there yesterday. So this is all footage from yesterday. Excuse me guys, I've Just had to hit off the bong if you weren't watching. But yeah, that was all in the Dáil there yesterday. Maurice brought up a couple of things then there as well, like, but one of the main things he said is that this isn't a new issue. That this is an issue that's been around for a long time, and it's just getting more and more and more out of hand. And Frank Feighan and his colleagues, you know, they want to continue with this failed prohibition, this failed war on drugs. That basically leaves our Gardai under-resourced and people in the communities afraid to even engage with the authorities because of fear of being targeted, because these gangs are quite powerful in the areas that they can operate in. And the intimidation, it's incredibly real, like it really is. It's crazy what's actually going on in Ireland and how out of hand it all gets. Like in Cork there yesterday, we had 12 million euro worth of cocaine being found on a shipping container. You know, and the guys patting themselves on the back, thinking that this is a good job being done. You know, that there was comments there from who was it there now? Mick Gilligan, head of the National Drug Investigations at Revenue. All right, he says about this seizure that today's seizure of cocaine will have a significant impact on organised crime and demonstrates the hard work that is undertaken every day by Revenue's customs service and on Garda Síochána in confronting this threat. The collaboration across both agencies was significant in the successful outcome of this operation. Right, they're patting themselves in the back saying this is great, this is a successful operation, but in reality, like there's going to be way more cocaine after getting to the streets than what they're after taking here off of the streets. This, like again, as I said, this could have been a decoy package, do you know, where information was leaked to the Gardaí to draw attention there to container A1, while meanwhile container A2 goes by undetected. Do you know, it's a very easily done thing. They say it's 12 million worth of cocaine. You see the size of it here. It's barely going to take up one of me bloody cupboards. Barely take up one of me drawers. Like it's such a small volume, but it's got such a high value to it, and it's all because of the war on drugs, the prohibition. If we were to end the prohibition, really, like our streets would be so much safer because the supply would be able to be regulated. The quality would be assured, and the people who actually develop addictions could really be helped out because they wouldn't have to be hiding behind away from the stigma of being an illegal drug user, because that's the biggest stigma there is the drug of choice is illegal. So a lot of people don't want to admit it because they've got good jobs, or you know, that they're well liked in their community. And you know, they might be fearful of the stigma, so they'll never admit it because it's an illegal drug. But yet, you know, they'd have no problem at telling you that they have a pint at the weekend because that's not illegal. John, and again, like the boy saying this is a job well done, just so much good. Like, come on, guys, anybody out there having a hard time getting cocaine? Like, really? Who's actually even using cocaine now? Like, I suppose, like, people are having their own little gaff parties and things like, but without the pubs and nightlife, like, oh, what's the crack with cocaine? Maybe you're a farmer and you need to plough your field. Just don't be driving your tractor. But yeah, massive failure this war on drugs actually is, and it's been highlighted time and time again in the Dáil, and people like Frank Feighan, like, he's just like, oh yeah, I'm not listening. He really isn't really listening, because drugs are they're everywhere in our society. They really fucking are everywhere in our society. Do you know, it's crazy. The next piece I want to bring up to you is from Gary Gannon. Gary Gannon is a TD with the Social Democrats, and he questions Frank Feighan, and he gets some response actually in relation to drug debt and intimidation. Because while we talk about the value of drugs, you know, 12 million worth of drugs seized and all of that, there's people out there who generate massive debts because, you know, you could have one weekend of binging on cocaine and have, I don't know, 3,000 euro worth of debt on your head, really. Like, I don't think I'm exaggerating on that, but there's definitely people out there who can kind of get a bit carried away with the cocaine. So it was interesting. Gary Gannon brought it up, and he questioned him because throughout the questions in the Dáil talking about drugs and drug addiction and homelessness, and not once was drug debt intimidation brought up. So I'll just quickly pop on over there just so you can see this for yourselves, guys.
Thank you. Cahirley. Last June, I wrote to
wrong one,
Minister
actually.
Donnelly's
Apologies there, that's the wrong one. This is the one here. No, that's not the one either. Where is he? There he is. Sorry, Gary Gannon. There we go.
Deputy Gary Gannon.
Good man, good Harlock. I'm often fascinated by when we give long presentations, such as what we got this morning in 20 minutes. I'm often fascinated by what we miss in that presentation and what isn't said. And I was quite surprised, Minister, and tell me please if I missed it, but there was absolutely no reference in your presentation this morning to drugs-related death or intimidation, which is something that's endemic in not just my community of Dublin Central, but communities all over Dublin and all over Ireland, I'd imagine also, where the issues of drug-related death cannot be separated from the experiences being catered for and tried to be managed by drug services and homeless services all over the country. I'm very interested in actually why that was a miss from your presentation this morning. Actually, I'm going to build my first question around it. Coming up to the mid-term review of the National Drug Strategy, will the mid-term review factor in how endemic drug-related death and intimidation is, and will you provide the services, and what models will they consist of in terms of them? Because I would be shocked if drug-related death and intimidation weren't factored into this review of the mid-term drugs and alcohol strategy. My second question, and I will give you time to answer them, pertains to the mid-term review of the drug strategy, and also in relation to the health diversion programme. Minister, will this health diversion programme, which I believe has built-in limitations into it, continue to criminalise people who in their struggle with health and trauma-related illness, continue to criminalise them if they have one or more two possessions of drugs, or more than one possession of drugs? Because if you do, any conversation about empathy, any conversation about understanding goes out the window, will we continue to criminalise people who I don't believe are committing crimes?
Deputy Minister Feighan.
Thank you, Deputy. And I had a speech for 15 or 20 minutes, and you were very, very rightly said that I had to take out something because I only had 10 minutes. But regarding drug-related intimidation, I am very aware of the activity, and an active illicit drug market and the intimidation and the frightening environment for families and communities. And a key action of the National Drug Strategy is to strengthen the effectiveness of the drug-related intimidation reporting programme. Effectively, I will talk about this in the National Mid-Term Review, and if you want to, you're more than welcome to put in submissions into that mid-term review, and I'd be happy maybe to meet you as well, and we can, because it is a very, very important issue. And one issue that supported the National Family Support Network, it funded a drug-related intimidation trainer coordinator, and also the Gardai are very, very aware, and the National Family Support Agency have carried out evaluations of the drug-related intimidation reporting programme, and it's resulted in a number of improvements, but again, and its effectiveness. But again, I look forward to exactly what you're saying regarding the health diversion programme. Yeah, there are issues here, and we are working with Justice to implement the health diversion programme, and it is part of the National Drug Strategy, and I am looking forward to again phasing this in, and also the cost involved. We are looking at, I think it's 5 different areas where we're going to have a pilot programme around the country to see how it works.
And so,
So apologies, I kind of knocked that video off there, but that Gary Gannon was about to respond to Frank Feighan. But I just wanted to interrupt to kind of say that would he really have left out the drug debt and intimidation if he was aware of it? Because it's a massive, massive problem for people out there involved in this thing. I'm just going to quickly get up his response, because I know it's up on his own Facebook or Twitter page here. So here he is. Keep trying to call him Dr. Gary Gannon. I don't know why do I keep trying to call him that. Here's his response. I'm just going to throw this up there for you guys, because it's worthwhile hearing his response as well to what Frank Feighan had said to him.
In relation to you've referenced the drug relation death intimidation project worker that was an initiative of the Family Support Network. I think it's very important to say that that role has actually ceased almost a month and a half ago now, and that role that you referenced there, which was a success, has been defunded. It's one of the last acts of that role was to commission a report which demonstrated in a very small part of the north inner city, over 20% of respondents to a survey had shown that they had themselves had suffered from drug-related death intimidation. Minister, I think this is a urgent need to get this right, and I would strongly encourage you not just to get it right in my own constituency and draw a line around it, get it right all over the country. We need a new model and a new approach to how we deal with the consequences of drugs. It needs to be trauma-informed, trauma-led, and I'd be happy to partake in those discussions. And actually, I think we should widen it out, and this should be a collective effort, because for over 45 years now, we've applied the same mechanisms to our response to drugs, and we keep getting the same outcomes: continued marginalisation, continued violence, continued deprivation. Minister, I'd love to be partake in those discussions, so please factor us in. Let's be evidence-led, and let's stop repeating the mistakes of the past. Most specifically, I would say let's stop criminalising people who've experienced huge trauma and are self-medicating for that purpose. If we can get one thing right over the course of the next years, that will be fundamentally change how we deal with this issue as a republic.
And that was Gary Gannon's response there to what Frank Feighan had said. But I also want to mention that Frank Feighan touched off of the de facto decriminalisation we had in Ireland, where he was talking about the health diversion programme. It's a farce, really. The guys over at the Tunaris talk about it, as well as James Leonard. He talks about the fact that how when he was addicted to heroin, he could have got caught with heroin 3 times in one day, and how the hell does the health diversion programme help him then? And again, you heard him, it's at the discretion then of the guard. If the guards are after catching you with heroin once and twice, now the 3rd time in the day, like, he's not going to show you any discretion. He's going to criminalise you then again at that point. But one thing I'll go further on what Gary Gannon is saying, though, like, he talks about the people and the trauma and all of that stuff, and while there is a lot of validity there to that, like, he's overlooking the many people out there who aren't addicted to drugs that use illegal drugs. People like myself, I use cannabis, and I wouldn't find myself as a person who would be addicted of it and in need of some health diversion. Now, I don't know if how many people out there checked out the talk last night over on the Irish Canna Clinic, or Wednesday night it was, and basically over on that talk there was Laura Ramos. She was a reporter for the Cannabis Reporter, I think is the name of her website, but she talks about the fact of how in Portugal still cannabis users are largely discriminated against because of this type of health diversion. The fact that you're using an illegal drug, it means you need an intervention. Oh, you have to divert. Why? Why can't I decide when I need a health intervention? I'm able to do my college work. I'm able to present this podcast, while doing bong hits. Do you know what I mean? I've done 4 years of college doing bong hits. No issue at all. Why do I need a health diversion? I'm able to go training 7 days a week. I'm able to, run fucking 10-mile runs. What's the problem? Why do I need a health diversion? Because they just deem my drug of choice as it's illegal. That's discrimination. Like, guys, come on, we can't discriminate against people. Let me decide when I have a health problem. Really, like, it's absolutely ridiculous. But there was other comments there then again in the Dáil, and I'm just going to pop on over. The next person up is Mark Ward. Mark Ward talks about how in Clondalkin they're basically, again, similar to Limerick, the people are just dealing just openly. Services are unable to actually they stop the drug dealing, that they catch them from time to time, but they don't ever stop it. It's just an ongoing affair. Here's Mark Ward.
Thanks, Minister. Deputy Mark Ward.
Good morning. Funding for local drug task forces are 3 million less now than they were 10 years ago, and that's despite promise after promise by successive governments. As a former director myself of the Clondalkin Drug and Alcohol Task Force, I have seen at first hand how addiction services have tried to do more with less. Drug and alcohol task forces need multi-annual funding to provide the services that their communities desperately need. In 2019, almost 65 million was seized by CAB. This money originated in areas of high levels of deprivation, areas like my own in North Clondalkin. Deprivation and poverty caused by systemic failures in government policies. Drug intimidation can take many forms. Like, you have to walk around some quiet estates that were previously quiet estates in Clondalkin, and you can see drug dealing going on with relative impunity. Neighbours are absolutely terrified, and the money that these unscrupulous drug dealers are getting, the money that eventually, hopefully, gets seized by cabs. This money needs to be put back into these communities. This money that goes to cabs originates from the purses of mothers who are paying these drug dealers due to intimidation. It should be ring-fenced to build resilience in our communities. This is not money that should be used to replace current funding, or money to be used as an excuse not to increase further funding down the road, but it should be used to resource community initiatives in the very communities who are being failed by successive governments. Minister, have your government even considered putting this money that was ripped from our communities directly back into them? People who have dual diagnosis often fall between the gaps. Addiction and mental health often go hand in hand. An addiction may lead to the onset of a mental health issue, or a mental health issue can lead to people using substances as a coping mechanism. Because of the inadequacies in the state's mental health system, people can turn to drink and drugs to give calm to an anxious in our world. Myself and Tommy Gould have legislation at second stage, the No Wrong Door Bill, and I will be asking your government to support that when it goes through the House. And finally, you only have to walk through our parks and estates to see the discarded nitrous oxide canisters, also known as silver bullets. As community structures for children, such as sports and schools and youth clubs, have decreased because of the pandemic and restrictions, the use of nitrous oxide has increased. The problem is that our kids are playing Russian roulette with this substance. They do not know how it will affect them until they actually take it. So, Minister, I'm asking, what measures have you taken to combat this issue, and do you still believe that it's just a Dublin problem, like you previously stated?
Minister Feighan.
First of all, I do agree with the Deputy regarding the ring fencing of funding. My colleague, Deputy Neil Richmond, has been to the forefront, and many others. And maybe it's time for a debate on that would be put back into the local drug task forces, or addressing the issue.
Debate to legalise cannabis and use that money, you clown.
The funding in November 2020, I approved a one-off funding of 20,000 for each task force, including your local task force, to assist in the continuation restoration of drug and alcohol service during the pandemic. And also I've allocated an additional 1 million for a new funding scheme, again, as I said, for task forces in 2021, to increase the core funding. So I have met with all the task forces, and I've asked them whatever they require to let us know, and in the department and with my official, we will do everything we can to help them in their funding or whatever resources is necessary. But again, it is an issue, and again, I want to thank the local drugs task forces and alcohol task forces for all the work that they are doing in addressing this awful problem.
Thanks, Minister. Deputy Gino Kenny.
Thanks, Chair.
And guys, before I go to Gino Kenny, you know, at no point there, like, he welcomes a debate about how to spend the money of the drug dealers. But like, well, why aren't we talking about the fact that they're able to make so much money, that there's so much use out there, that there's a need to protect people? Now, we're going to hear in his response here to Gino Kenny's question, which comes up right after that there, as it was just about to start. But Frank Feighan uses in his response here, and spoiler alert, he brings about, like, you know, a health-led approach. Like, a health-led approach. Like, the best thing you could do in a health-led approach to help people who use or are addicted to drugs is you ensure the quality of the supply of the drugs, because currently that seems to be the biggest danger to them, is contaminated drugs. You know, people using heroin, getting fentanyl. Like, come on, like, this is a no-brainer. Like, just open up. Like, we already give them methadone. Like, methadone is, it's not much different to heroin. Why can't we just open up the heroin clinic? Because it'll sort out, like, we talk about the dealers and the Kinnins and stuff. And actually, before I go to Gino Kenny's one, I just want to just play a little clip here as well from from Paul McAuliffe. Paul McAuliffe is a TD for, I believe he's a Fianna Fáil TD. So come up, yeah, Fianna Fáil TD. And he also commented the Frank Feighan yesterday, and there's a video here about his thing. But he says, if you think it's difficult for people with an addiction to deal with the gambling industry or the alcohol industry, try dealing with the Kinnins. And my contribution on the industry behind the sale of illegal drugs and how we need to move towards a health-led approach. So my response to him in that was decriminalise the growing and possession of cannabis, allow the community to grow it for themselves on a non-profit basis, and ban the advertising of all drugs, and instead, and I mean in all drugs, I mean alcohol too, and instead, and have, I made a mistake there, have campaigns of education around use and abuse. That would do a lot to cripple these drug gangs. Like, it really would, you know. I think that the illegal drugs trade, if we were to clean it up, if we were to regulate it, even if it was the state supplied it, sure, how would the Kinnins then ever make money in it? And it needs to be about harm reduction, and it's not about consumerism then at that point, which is our mistake we made with alcohol and tobacco. Consumerism, the Heineken cup. Do you know that this is ridiculous, like? This is absolutely ridiculous. It's as ridiculous as McDonald's sponsoring the Olympics. But look, we won't go there on that topic today. Here we go. I'll just play this thing because he mentions the recent murder in Ballymun.
Minister, last week in my constituency in Ballymun, we saw the death of another man related to the illegal drugs industry. And while other deputies have spoken about the addiction to gambling or the addiction to alcohol, the reality is that if that gentleman had not had an addiction to illegal drugs, he might likely be alive, because
he might have heard that in the world, Martin's world.
The alcohol industry or the gambling industry, try dealing with the Kinahans. And the reality is, Minister, that we do need to look at the commitments in the programme for government to move towards examining how we dismantle the organised crime industry around the sale and supply of illegal drugs, and that we ensure that we deal with people who have an addiction in a very humane way, in a health-led way. In order to do that, Minister, we need to fund our local drugs task forces. And I would ask you, given that we haven't seen an increase in funding for local drugs task forces for more than 6 years, can the Minister examine what funding might be made available in next year's budget to ensure that we support this really important work?
Mr. Feighan.
Yes, I have made money available for the local drugs task forces, over €1 million, and we also have up to €460,000, which we're looking for target initiatives from various task forces. And again, I want to pay tribute to the great work that the task forces are doing, and I am aware of that awful situation in your constituency, Deputy, and you have raised it with me, and I'm looking forward as well to a report that is coming out in the constituency, which will inform us of how best to move forward as well. So again, I'd like to thank you for raising these issues, and I'm available to meet the local task force when we're allowed after the COVID-19 lockdown.
The most annoying thing to me about Frank Feighan, you know, and all his willingness to engage, he's never willing to engage with the community. How often, guys, and just make sure I'm right, yeah. How often, guys, have you tried to reach out to Frank Feighan? I know that there's many activists out there, or many campaigners, who've rang and sent messages, and it's just, you know what I mean? You might as well be talking to the stone wall. You might as well, because he's ignoring us. We're the people who use the drugs, and we're trying to have an engagement here with him, and he's ignoring us. This is disrespect. It's discrimination as well. It really is. It's absolutely ridiculous. And Thomas Gould, actually, a local Sinn Féin TD here, kind of calls him out on it, really. Because he says here, not all homeless people are in active addiction, and not everyone in active addiction is homeless. Do the government not understand this? And he's kind of calling out Frank Feighan and company as to how they don't even have a clue what they're talking about, because a lot of the times the two things kind of really do get intertwined when talking about one. It seems like you're talking about the other.
I want to express my disappointment at the title of these questions. Addiction services and homelessness are two issues and are often intertwined. But we must recognise that these are two separate issues. Those in active addiction or those in need of addiction services are not always homeless, and vice versa. Homeless people are not always in active addiction. To say otherwise shows a complete lack of understanding, and it's about time this government stop insulting some of the most vulnerable in our society.
And what annoyed me there about Thomas Gould is he just didn't go one further and say not everybody who uses a drug is addicted, because currently that's how we see it. You go in front of a judge, you're using an illegal drug, you must be addicted. Sure, what else is this health diversion program about? It's it's discrimination. Like, we shouldn't be doing it. Like, do you not understand this? Like, go a little bit further in what you're saying. Like, don't be afraid to push the boundary a little bit. Like, we need to decriminalise the drug user. Like, the Misuse of Drugs Act, it's a complete failure. Like, it really is. Like, madness, guys. And look, at the final person to go to, or not the final person, actually. There's one other TD that mentions drugs on the Dáil there yesterday. Before I get to Gino Kenny and his question to Frank Feighan, this is Niamh Smyth. She's another, I believe, a Fianna Fáil TD. There we go.
Deputy Niamh Smyth.
Thank you, Cathaoirleach. Substance abuse, principally drug and alcohol misuse, is rising throughout our country. As a rural TD, I see the growth of drug use in every corner of Cavan, Monaghan and Northmeath. It is no longer confined to towns and the margins of society or shadowy places. It's in every strata of society, in every village and townland. Young and old are represented in drug misuse statistics, and the longer people sustain drug misuse, the more likely they are to die because of that misuse. There are more drug-related deaths than road fatalities at the moment, and that's a staggering figure. At an AA meeting, new members introduce themselves by their name and their admission of addiction, which is the first tentative step of acknowledging the problem and seeking recovery. I fear that we are not near that stage with drug addiction in rural Ireland. With the availability and spread of drugs throughout the country, we are in danger of losing a generation if we don't engage with the issue as quickly as possible. We must start by recognising the problem and its extent, having support groups within towns throughout the country, services dealing with the addictions, and widely promote and make helplines available. The social acceptance of drug and alcohol use has severe implications longer term. The serious health problems are being stored up, dysfunctional families and lost individuals are other consequences. Peer education surrounding the dangers of alcohol and drug misuse is another avenue worthy of developing and piloting nationally. The dated approach that we've had up to now.
I'm just going to stop her there now at that point, because basically I just wanted to just re-emphasise how the war on drugs has failed. You know, she's from a rural part of Ireland there, where, like, countryside, you know, a farm girl, no offence meant by that, like, but you know, the drugs every bloody where. Like, people are addicted to drugs, as she was kind of saying, everywhere. Like, what she's calling for here is wider access to addiction services, because it seems like they always kind of get centralised around cities and bigger towns and things like that, but rural Ireland is affected by drugs too. But she doesn't go far enough in what she's saying again. Like, she doesn't call for, like, the dismantlement of the drug supply network by the government setting up and regulating an actual network where people can get drugs that don't come from a black bloody market. It's ridiculous. You know, all of that cocaine that was pictured there earlier in the show, that came from South America. Like, the leaves that cocaine came from were grown most likely by a family of farmers who you know, they're just growing their crop, and coca leaves, which cocaine comes from, is the most profitable for them. And you know, unfortunately for them, did they get caught up in this massive kind of global network where the leaves they sell to the criminals who process it in the woods or the forests over there. They turn it into the cocaine, they sell it on for more money, they use different mules and stuff like that. There's so much nastiness that goes on all because of it. All of these people along the way, they're all victims of this stupid bloody war on drugs that's failed. The drugs have won. They're everywhere. Do you know what I mean? You can get them down in the farm shed there in the back ass of Kerry, like, you know. And that was a case that came up there not too long ago where there was a farmer who was dealing, you know, out of his farm shed. Do you know, it's everywhere, guys. It's everywhere. Just decriminalise the drug user, clean up the supply. Like, come on, like, but here we go. Like, the next one up is Gino Kenny, and Gino Kenny is finishing off today because he actually does that. He called for the legalisation of cannabis anyway, which is one of just many drugs that needs to be legalised and regulated. But he does that, and he questions Frank Feighan on it. And here you go on. Here's this.
Thanks, Minister. Deputy Gino Kenny.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Minister, for your statement and so forth. And this is probably the first time I've probably engaged with you in a formal way, so I do wish you well in your tenure here. We probably have kind of different views in relation to alcohol and drug kind of policies, but I think as your conclusion says, it's about harm reduction, and I think that is what it's about, because the previous policies of other governments have been literally a failure. And I think you will understand that obviously the pandemic has put on huge pressures in relation to alcohol and drug intervention supports. Obviously people can't go there in a physical sense, so that is causing huge difficulties for those that was that outlet, but that's not there anymore, and it's not the same kind of doing it remotely. So there's a huge kind of lacuna there. So hopefully that can be kind of addressed in kind of when the pandemic kind of in the next 3 or 4 months. Minister, I just want to kind of ask you a number of questions in relation to the drugs strategy. It's my opinion that the present policy is a complete failure, and it's failing people. And it's good that you have kind of referenced that, you know, it's health inequalities faced by people who are are homeless and in addiction. And obviously this is a societal thing that needs to be kind of teased out. In relation to decriminalisation, like, this debate has been going on for years, and it's like it goes around and around and around, and nobody answers. It's my understanding that the Citizens' Assembly will discuss this in relation to decriminalisation, and we have to understand what decriminalisation means. It's decriminalising the person rather than the drugs that they have for personal use. So that needs. We want to find out when the Citizens' Assemblies will discuss this, and will decriminalisation for personal use, where in other jurisdictions it has worked, will this be implemented? And I think we need to even go further than decriminalisation in relation to certain drugs, particularly around cannabis. I think the possession of cannabis and the kind of bringing people through the criminal justice system is literally a failure. It's a complete failure. Bringing people to court, giving them kind of sentences, criminal convictions, complete failure. So I want to know your opinions on the legalisation of cannabis in this drug strategy in the 4 years your tenure here. Thanks.
Mr. Feighan.
Thank you, Deputy, and again, I want to thank you for the measured way you put your views forward, and we do come from a different.
Just be warned, guys. There's a lot of bullshit about the come your way. Just be forewarned. You know, no disclaimer there for you.
I suppose perspectives, and in between us, we try to get the best possible answers to, again, this very difficult problem. The National Drug Strategy did set out a health-led approach to drug use, and it does promote a more compassionate and humane response to people who use drugs, with drug use treated as first and foremost as a public health issue. As you know, the government established a working group, and the working group decided that they would go for the health-led approach, and also to possession of drugs for personal use. And effectively, what we're trying to do on a first-time offence, that people that they would be interact with the health services and a pathway to recovery, avoiding a criminal conviction. We've met with the Cannabis Risk Alliance group from another perspective, and all of them were GPs and psychiatrists with significant expertise in the field of addiction and psychiatry, and they were also parents, but they also outlined the damaging effects of cannabis, and particular for adolescents. So I don't think we cannot be complacent about the risk to health posed by illicit drugs, but we have set out a health-led approach, and hopefully the health diversion programme will be a start of that. People who are caught in possession the first time, that they will be getting a health diversion programme, and secondly, it will be at the discretion of the Gardai. But I cannot see the legalisation, because sometimes it leads to the decriminalisation, which can have a knock-on effect. But in the National Oversight Committee, or the mid-term review, I would welcome your submissions to that mid-term review. And again, I want to thank you for your observations and also your cooperation and your work with trying to sort this issue out. Thank you.
Deputy Bernard Durkin.
And I'm just going to leave this one play for a second, guys.
I think I have 4 minutes, but I won't be. I'll leave room for some of my colleagues if that's agreeable. First of all, I would like to thank our ministers for coming before the House this morning and addressing this very important issue. I speak as a former member of a Ministerial Drugs Task Force, and I would empathise with some of the points raised by people who are directly involved on the ground in dealing with the addiction issues. And I think very often they have a different perspective to what we as legislators have. In particular, I remember in relation to methadone. Methadone I always saw as a means to an end, not an end in itself. Unfortunately, over the years it has become vague as to what it is meant to do, and I think we need to go back to base on that. I don't agree with my colleague Gino Kenny in relation to legalisation. We have too many gateway drugs, and the gateway drugs, while in themselves may not be the worst in terms of the issue, but they do lead to other ones that are serious. And
I'm just going to stop him there. That's all. He just made my case. This guy who was just talking, Bernard Durkin, whatever his name is, doesn't really matter. He thinks cannabis is a gateway drug. Oh my God, and this guy was on an alcohol, drug and alcohol task force. Guys, this will tell you the idiots who are out there driving policy and in charge of different organisations. They're I'm sorry, but he's an idiot. If he doesn't realise that the gateway theory is being debunked, it is not true. There is no drug that makes you want to take another drug. What happens to a person if they go from one drug to another drug is because that first drug wasn't enough to give them the escape that they were looking for, so did they go to something harder? Do you know that is more able to give them the dissociation from whatever it is they're trying to escape from, So oh my God, to have people like this to be talking that in the Dáil of all places, to be talking the gateway drug theory, it's absolute lunacy. It's madness. I'm sorry that's actually kind of the end of it there, and that's how it finished. But it's absolute lunacy that was what we got stuck with, man. The gate, we don't need another gateway. Okay, I would agree with him. Alcohol certainly can be seen as a gateway drug because you're getting drunk, your decision making capacity it's reduced, so you make some silly decisions. You end up snorting a line of coke, which is in my case what happened. I was drunk when I decided I would try cocaine. And had I been sober, I probably wouldn't have. But again, that's one kind of way in which a drug can be a gateway. But when you're drinking, does drinking make you want to do alcohol or cocaine? No. But when you're drinking, if somebody says to you, "Do you want to do a line?" and if you're really drunk, you might say yeah, because you mightn't even say anything. You might just go, and it's gone. You won't even answer them. You're just drunk. You're just out of it. So yeah, in one way, alcohol could be. But there's nothing in alcohol that makes you want to use other drugs, and similar to that, the cannabis, to all of them, there's nothing in them that makes you want to use other ones. you definitely, when you're taking yokes, you don't want to come down. You want to do more yokes. But when you're doing yokes, you don't want to take other drugs. When you're smoking cannabis, you certainly don't think to yourself, fuck it, I'd love to have a line now as well. It defeats the purpose of having your joint. Like, come on, like, it's ridiculous. But his response there to Gino Kenny, then Frank Feighan, when asked about cannabis legalisation, oh no, we can't legalise it, and geez, we can't decriminalise it because that'll de facto legalise it. It's like, man. And then he goes on to talk about his health-led approach. So it's better that the kids are getting their drugs from a market where there's no need for an ID, where there's no need for quality checks, where there's no proper indicators of strength. Come on, like, what are you on about in a health-led approach that doesn't include regulating the supply, especially when it comes to cannabis? Like, you're talking through your arse, like, come on, like, if you can't, like, have a conversation about a health-led approach to drug use without actually sorting out the drugs, because again, like, and it's not even just myself saying this, but Dr. Carl Hart, like, he talks about it. The most dangerous thing to the drug user is the quality of the drug that they're consuming. Because again, you don't want your heroin to be contaminated with fentanyl. You don't want your cannabis to be sprayed with bloody fiberglass or any of that other nasty stuff that we found in their cannabis. Do you remember the diesel hash, guys? Oh, yuck. Thank God we don't have the diesel hash anymore. Oh, yes. So guys, thanks everybody for commenting, and I hope you enjoyed the show today. Again, just a little twist on things. I wanted to just make sure, because that was painful for me to kind of go and find those little snippets, and for yourselves, like, unless you're following each of those individual politicians, you probably wouldn't have seen that. But again, the pressure is certainly on there in the Dáil, and the conversation is being had somewhat, but it's been avoided largely. There's a lot of scapegoating. Oh, it's not my department, it's their department, oh, we're dealing with it. There was a lot of calls for funding for the local drug and alcohol task force. And I actually, interestingly, applied for the volunteer position this morning on the Cork's drug and alcohol task force. So I wonder what the response might be to my application there. For that, it's a voluntary position as the representative for the community on the North Central. So I'll see what happens there. We'll see what reply I get from them. But yeah, there seems like be a lot of calls for funding there for those guys. But I wonder, like, what's the mindset of the people within those drug and alcohol task forces? Do they believe that the supply needs to be controlled and cleaned up and regulated, so that we can actually really effectively tackle the drug dealers and the damage they're doing to communities out there, such as was brought up on the show in Limerick today? So guys, I'll quickly just flick some of your comments, because I'm going to have to run there. It's Friday and I have a meeting. But they understand if I'm late. Guys, I'm just seeing some comments coming in. Bono420, he's just reading a script. They were all just reading a script, man. All of them just had their pre-prepared script. Very few of them really were speaking from the heart. I think maybe Gino didn't really have a script there, but certainly the rest of them were reading from scripts and things. There was comments there from you on Emer Higgins, I think's her name as well, or as God, think of the kids, and she was on about the NOS, the laughing gas shit, like, and what does she want to do? Like, put it into the hands of the drug dealers now and make the kids actually go to the drug dealers? No, we need proper education programs going out there to kids to know about this stuff, that, look, these are the dangers. This is, if you're going to do it, this is kind of what you need to know about it and what have you, we don't want to be making them go to drug dealers to get their NOS. Like, if they're ordering it online through a bloody catering supply store, leave them. Like, they're better off getting it from the catering supply store than getting it from some bloody criminals. Like, Ken says, why do they always drag kids into this? If legal, it be for adult consumption. No, the fucking kids, it's just like booze, 18s. Exactly, yeah, exactly. They always do try to, think of the kids, but yeah, really, if they legalise and control the supply, it'd be much safer for kids. You're dead right, Ken. Pat Whelan says, so he's saying, too dangerous for the young teenagers, so we will just leave it for the dealers to sell it to them. Yeah, exactly. That's pretty much what they say when they support prohibition. So you're dead right there, Pat, as well. Edward says, we don't fucking care, in other words. Yeah, they pretty much, they don't care up there in the Dáil, because we're putting it to them, we're basically giving them the answers. The community, the drug users, we're stepping up, we're saying, look guys, regulate the supply. It's the best thing you could do to us, and it's the best thing you could do for tackling the illegal drug gangs that are out there that are making so much money off this. Knowledge is power, says legislators are so far attached from people, they are not equipped to debate this. Man, you're dead right. Like that's my biggest issue in all of that debate there. The community are not involved in this at all. Like because me as a drug user, I've never been represented truly up there in the Dáil. I've never really been asked my opinion and having that shared. They don't care, you know. They just look down on you and they disregard. As soon as they hear you campaigning for legalisation or decriminalisation, it's like no, that's not, you know, no, closed, you know, stonewall straight up, like, you know, those barriers, those closed-minded Fianna Fáilers, Fine Gaelers, like when they're like, no, abstinence, it's all abstinence, health-led abstinence. What's health-led if it doesn't include cleaning up the supply? Come on, guys. That's why I put it up there now. I put it to Niamh Smyth, who commented. I put it to, as you've seen there, to what was his face? What was that guy's name again? Jeez, the other fucking I don't have his name written down actually, but the other Fianna Fáiler. Yeah, I put it to him there as well in his comments about cleaning up the supply. Oh yeah, the guy who was on about the Kinnahans. Yeah, that guy. So I put it to him. You know, let's see what they respond to, if they actually are really serious about tackling the drug dealers and the drug gangs, because the best way you can do it, like, and there's no denying it, is by regulating and legalising the supply, because then they won't make so much money off it. They'll have to pay tax on it. They don't want it. Do you think fucking John Kinahan wants to pay tax? No, as soon as you legalise cannabis, John Kinahan is not going to be interested in selling cannabis anymore. Like, or John Gilligan, sorry to the Kinahans out there, John Gilligan is not going to be interested in selling cannabis. He'll just sell other counterfeit goods or other untaxable kind of things, you know, because he doesn't want to pay taxes. The criminals don't want to pay taxes. They'll go do other things that they don't want to pay taxes behind. As soon as there's taxes on it, oh God. But as I say, I think it should be non-profit and community orientated. I don't think it needs to be consumer driven, you know, as in getting the number of consumers up. There's enough consumers out there. Let's just protect them by cleaning up the supply. I would love to set up a little cannabis collective here in my area to get enough cannabis there to a community of members, and I'd imagine there's many other people who would be more than happy to do that under a non-profit model. You know, at least for the first 5 to 10 years until kind of we sorted the whole thing out, and immediately we need to kind of remove all these criminal convictions that have been given to people for personal drug possession too. Other comments coming in. I bet nobody in that room has any problem taking codeine-based painkillers from a chemist, which are highly addictive and cause all kinds of liver and stomach problems. Nothing will be done about it. No, I agree with you. Yeah, none of them probably even a problem there at all. And maybe once cannabis is properly regulated and coming from professionals, they probably won't have an issue there either. I'd imagine even some of them in the room are using some of the CBD products, you know, which again comes from cannabis. It's cannabis-based products. They probably use that, but you know, they'll probably shy away from saying it because of the stigma. You're probably right there in that sense. Edward Stewart says more of a personality fault than a drug fault. Yeah. Mal Moran says alcohol the gateway drug to bad decisions. Yeah, there you go. You know, it does, it encourages bad decisions. It certainly does. Darren T, old men making decisions again and again. Yeah, certainly they're far removed from the communities that they're making policies for, and that they're not involving the communities there in the decisions that are affecting them, i.e. the cannabis community. You know, Frank Feighan will talk about, health-led approach, but like, why isn't he engaging with the cannabis consumers and how best he can help them? And he'll soon realise we're not all addicted to cannabis. We don't need a health intervention. We need to have our quality, the supply cleaned up. We don't need to be bloody looking out our windows every 2 minutes to see if the guards are pulling up to raid our houses. You know, we don't need to be worrying like this, because that's bad for our health. We don't need to be stigmatised in society. That's bad for our health. Come on, if you want a health-led approach, clean up the supply, stop criminalising us and stop stigmatising us and stop discriminating us. It's fucking wrong. Like, it's so bloody wrong. Like, guys, and I see the numbers are going up today as well. Happy days. And a nice big audience out there watching as well. So thanks very much to everybody who's tuning in. Sorry I don't have enough time and I can't read all of your comments, but I'll get through a couple of more there as well, and get them in there if you want me to read them, because I'm just coming up on the most recent ones now. Backroad TV says people only take harder drugs if they want a different buzz. Comparing cannabis legalisation to drugs that kill like cocaine and heroin is stupid. 100%. It's like apples and oranges, you know what I mean? They're completely different. If I asked you for an apple and you gave me an orange, I'd be like, come here, like, lad. Other comments coming in there then as well. Paul FX says, cannabis is not for kids who are the Jimmy Savile advocates. Who are they? Jimmy Savile advocates. Yeah, you need to start using apostrophes when reading that all like one sentence, or those little commas, whatever it's called. But yeah, you're dead right, man. The cannabis is not for kids. We're not saying legalise cannabis and let us sell it to kids. No, we're saying legalise cannabis, regulate it, and stop having it sold to kids. Don't protect them, do you know? Jeez, it's crazy, like. Monsieur Fudge says, good job for the application. We need us people to give the opinion of the people. That's what I'm hoping for. I hope they accept me as a community representative, not only from the north side, but from the cannabis community too, guys. Hello, Martin. Shout out to my mate Ruark, who kicked his gear habit with cannabis. Happy days, man. Delighted to say that. That came in from I Am Toby. Ooh, all this talking, guys. Cotton mouth and a dry throat. Ooh. We're getting there, though. We're getting there. John Q says, they are puppets, not more. Why not get all the Snapchat pages together? We close Cork for the day. Guys, if all of the cannabis community just stood up, guys, just stood up together. Let's not be divided, you know. Guys, I was watching Nelson Mandela, the Mandela road to the long road to retribution, I think it was called. But yeah, that comes from that, you know. There's me, there's you, there's him, there's the other person, you know, and we're all individuals, we're divided, but, you know, together, we're strong, you know what I mean? Fucking, this is the community, like, we need to stand up together, guys. If we all stood up together, they'd have no choice but to listen to us. They don't take us seriously at all, because we're so disorganized, you know. Like, we have a yearly protest, you know. Oh, we send emails, we send letters, like, but really, like, we've been ignored for so long, like, and we just take it. We take the ignoring, like, it's wrong, like, it's discrimination to ignore a person, to not talk to a person, and acknowledge their presence, like, that's discrimination. It's messed up. Nice one for sharing that stream there as well. Dave Moriarty says, made the first step today and asked someone for weed. They said no, but at least I tried. Good man, Dave. Happy to hear, but be careful who you ask, though. If you're having trouble, guys, just check out the dark web. It's not that hard at all to order it and have it delivered to your door through the dark web. I Am Toby says, I stand up now, but I get mad because like some Jack Herrer or something. I got mad coach like some Jack Herrer or something. Nice in there for your comments, guys. Darren T says, my doctor and psychiatrist can't understand that weed saving my life. They are both over 50 years of age. Yeah, a bit outdated, I suppose. Maybe you need to get a new doctor and psychiatrist, but obviously that's not always possible too. So guys, thanks everybody for participating in today's show and for all your comments. It's been an absolute pleasure, guys. I hope you've enjoyed it. I think there's promising things to take away from today's show. There's pressure being applied in the Dáil now. The conversation's being had. They want to take a health-led approach. It's up to us now as a cannabis community, guys, to stand up and be represented, and how the health-led approach is to best represent us as consumers of the drug that they're saying is so bloody harmful. So guys, stand up and be represented, or you know, for forever let somebody else represent your voice, and sadly it won't be me if I don't have a large community standing up with me, echoing what it is I'm saying. You know, I am only one person, guys. You know, everybody stand up, let's get united, you know, fight the power, guys. So guys, thanks to everybody who's participated. It's been an absolute pleasure, guys. I'm gonna have to go now, and yeah, stay blazed out there, guys, and keep her lit. Have a good weekend. Look after yourselves, and I see you